Hey everybody, it's Ron, and I want to tell you a story about business and how that story changed everything. The wagon came into view before the wagon came into view. A cloud of dust rose first, out past the tree line on a flat stretch of prairie outside a small homestead in Nebraska in the spring of 1874. A middle-aged lady by the name of Sarah Kettering heard it before she saw it. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch to watch a horse-drawn wagon roll up the dirt track towards her house, with the word Singer Sewing Machine Company painted in bold letters along its side. Two people climbed down. The older man, gray at the temples, he moved slow and sure. He was the kind of man who had made this exact walk up 100 farmhouse porches before. Behind him came a younger woman, maybe 20, carrying a leather satchel of thread and fabric samples. Her posture a little too straight, the posture of someone still proving that she belonged there. On the front porch, the man made his introductions and explained they'd like to bring the machine in and show Sarah how it worked. He waited for her nod before they carried it in. The heavy cast-iron head settled into Sarah's own kitchen with a grunt of effort. Then he stepped back, arms crossed, and let his trainee work. His associate threaded the machine herself, sat with her foot on the treadle, and within a minute, a straight, even seam ran clean across a scrap of muslin, faster than Sarah's own hands could have managed in 5 times the time. Sarah's husband, leaning in the doorway, murmured something to the older salesman about it being women's work anyway, no trouble teaching a girl to run a needle machine, and the two men shared a low laugh over it, missing entirely that the woman running the machine was the one actually making the sale. Sarah watched that seam form and felt something close to want. "It's beautiful," she said, "but there's no way we could ever afford something like that." The young associate didn't flinch. She set down the fabric, met Sarah's eyes, and said the machine didn't need to be paid for all at once. $5 now, a few dollars more each month, and it was hers. Sarah looked at her husband. Her husband looked at the machine. So what does it take to sell a stranger on parting with money she doesn't even have yet? What happens when the person doing the actual convincing is the one nobody in the room takes seriously? And how did a broken machine brought into a Boston repair shop end up being patented with some changes on August 12th, 1851, and ended up 23 years later in the hands of a woman nobody expected to be the one closing the sale that day in Nebraska? From Business Basics, I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the daily podcast where we explain the stories that changed business forever. Every date on the calendar has a story where business reshaped the world. Today, August 12th, that story takes us to 1851. Two different kinds of genius. To start this off, it's important to understand that the man named Isaac Singer failed at almost everything before he built a working sewing machine. Born poor in New York, he actually spent much of his early adulthood chasing acting, running his own small, unsuccessful theatrical troupe, as well as taking work as a mechanic and a cabinet maker whenever the stage didn't pay the bills. In 1815, while he was in Boston showing off an entirely different invention, he found himself in the workshop of a machinist by the name of Orson Phelps. Phelps was in the process of building a sewing machine that was flawed and unreliable for two other men, John Laroe and Sherman Blodgett. While Singer stood there, he studied what was actually wrong with the machine that they were working on, and within 11 days, Singer had built something meaningfully better with a straight needle, a presser foot, and a design that actually held up under real use. So Singer hadn't invented the idea of a sewing machine at all. Elias Howe already had a patent for one from 1856. Singer had simply built the first version regular people could actually rely on. With the prototype built, Singer had no cash to pay a lawyer to complete and file the patent application for his ideas. That's where a man by the name of Edward Clark enters the story. Clark was a respectable New York lawyer who agreed to take a financial stake in the invention instead of a fee, which was an unusual arrangement that would end up mattering far more than either man expected. Fortunately or unfortunately, the lawyer, Edward Clark, learned quickly exactly who he'd partnered with in Singer. Isaac Singer was a man so personally chaotic that Clark's wife reportedly urged him to walk away entirely from the arrangement to protect himself. Even so, Clark stayed anyway, seeing a real fortune hiding underneath the mess Singer left in his wake. As a result, on August 12, 1851, Isaac Singer was granted U.S. Patent number 8294 for his improvements to the sewing machine. The legal fight came fast, and it came from more than one direction. As I mentioned, Elias Howe held the original foundational patent for the sewing machine, and he sued Singer for infringement. And by 1854, the courts had sided with Howe. Singer wasn't alone in the courtroom either. Rival manufacturers, a company named Wheeler and Wilson, and another company called Grover and Baker, were simultaneously suing each other over the same tangle of overlapping technology. It was a mess the press at the time nicknamed the Sewing Machine War. So in 1856, a lawyer representing one of those rival companies proposed something no one in the industry had tried: pooling the patents together instead of suing each other into the ground. The sewing machine combination formed that year, the first patent pool in American history. And Isaac Howe, who held the original patent, collected royalties from every major manufacturer operating under that agreement, eventually earning roughly $400,000 a year by 1859 across the whole industry. With the legal chaos finally behind them, Singer's partner, the lawyer Clark, turned to a problem no amount of engineering could solve. A Singer machine cost $100 at a time when the average American family earned roughly $500 a year. In September 1856, Clark introduced something genuinely new to American commerce: an installment plan. $5 down, $3 to $5 a month, allowed families to own a machine without ever having the full $100 sitting in a drawer at one time. Sales nearly tripled within a year. This is the moment worth naming directly. Isaac Singer built the machine. Edward Clark built the business that let ordinary families actually afford it. And those were two entirely different kinds of genius: invention and access. They both happened to land inside the same company at the same time. collecting those monthly payments required a sales force nobody had built before, so Edward Clark assembled one. Canvassers traveled door to door, carrying demonstration machines directly into farmhouses and parlors, threading them on the spot and letting a straight, even seam of stitching do the actual convincing. Singer Sewing Machine Company specifically hired women for this work too, a deliberate choice meant to counter the era's assumption that women were too delicate to operate a machine themselves, the exact instinct playing out in Sarah Kettering's own kitchen in Nebraska. By 1860, the Singer Company had become the largest sewing machine manufacturer in the world, and by the 1870s, that same canvasser and installment model had expanded into a genuinely global sales network, stretching from rural American homesteads to storefronts across Europe, Asia, and South America. What Edward Clark actually built, though, reached well past sewing machines. The installment plan introduced a financial mechanism the country hadn't widely used before, buying something you couldn't yet afford in exchange for paying a little at a time, trusted enough to become the model underneath automobiles, appliances, furniture, and eventually nearly everything Americans buy on credit today. A woman in a Nebraska farmhouse once looked at a machine she couldn't pay for outright and heard someone tell her she didn't have to. Two men built that moment 5 years apart, one of them a chaotic, half-broke mechanic who could barely manage his own finances, and the other a cautious lawyer who very nearly walked away. And neither one of them could have built it alone. I'm Ron Trucks, and this is Business History, the podcast that finds the turning points behind the headlines. To hear more stories like this, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. And if you're enjoying the stories, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a quick review. It helps more people find the story behind the business. And if you want to actually understand business better without the fluff, the buzzwords, or the MBA language, start by visiting businessdailypodcast.com.